Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of the Golden Years retirement community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show, we'll revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Ike Eisenmann and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. I'm one of your hosts, Jonathan Rosen, along with Ike Eisenmann, and today we are thrilled to welcome one of the stars of the sci-fi cult classic TV series, Fantastic Journey, an acclaimed award-winning director who also wrote the screenplay for the Neo-Noir classic, Devil in a Blue Dress. Please help us welcome Carl Franklin. Carl, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you.
Well, to start with, originally I read that you had intentions of going into education or law. What made you decide to change and go into theater instead?
You know, I was taking classes when I was in college. I was a history major, and in the first year, you know, you had to take a English class. There were certain requirements that had to be met. English 1A, comparative literature 1A, and then dramatic art 1A. And I think in English 1A, you read and critiqued essays. I think in comparative literature, it was more, you know, actual short stories and I guess novels, because I didn't take the class. And then dramatic art 1A, which sounded more fun, you know, reading plays, because, you know, I hadn't really done much of that, hadn't done any of that, really. Actually, I'd done a play in high school, so I take that back. But and the teacher, the grad student who was teaching it was getting her PhD, and part of her dissertation, part of her whatever you call that when they qualify for the PhD, part of that was that she had to direct a play. And so she did this version of Miss Julie, the Strindberg play, and she wanted me to play Jean, and so I did. And then a couple of the guys from the department saw it and said, "Hey, man, you ought to get into this." And it was really bad advice, man. You tell somebody to be an actor, you know, really, just, Ike, you know.
Oh, good grief! Yeah.
I couldn't. I mean, that's
never
like,
anything I support outwardly. I say you got to want it really bad and got to be really putting up with a whole lot of stuff to do that. But if you want to, go ahead.
yeah. You know, if you have the addiction, you know, then you got no choice. You know, I mean, you're gonna do it. You're gonna do it some kind of way. You know, and hopefully you get to do it on stage or on film. But it was, and so at any rate, I started doing plays. And then I got an opportunity to go to Joseph Pabst Public Theater, because the guy who was the stage manager at Zellerbach Theater, I was going to UC Berkeley at the time, the guy who was the stage manager at Zellerbach Theater was a guy named Rusty McGrath. And he was, he had been Joseph Pabst's stage manager at one time at the Public Theater. And so he got me an audition, and I think, you know, they just let me in, you know, because it was like, you know, I had a speech, and it was the summer when I was the Shakespeare Festival in the summer, and they did Timon of Athens, two really obscure Shakespeare plays, and then one hit. It was Timon of Athens and Cymbeline, which are very obscure Shakespeare plays for good reason. And then the other was Two Gents of Verona, which was actually a big hit back then, with Raul Julia and Clifton Davis and a few other people who were popular at the time. And so that got me in New York, and I didn't like New York. You know, I didn't really want to be on the East Coast, and I was kind of scared of New York too, because of all the muggings and all that. And I was having such a good time at Berkeley. I didn't want to leave, but, you know, I kept getting work. So I didn't really make a decision until I actually was doing it, you know, and then that's
I'm
when I
going to
thought,
ask you about the Shakespearean roles as well, because I've always wondered about how difficult that is for an actor, you know, because it's not just learning your lines, it's also learning that Shakespeare dialogue. So is that, you know, is that like a difficult process?
Well, you know, it wasn't so much, you know, because we didn't have to do the dialogue. We used the standard stage speech, which was the intermediate A. We weren't trying to do the British thing. fortunately. But, you know, that whole iambic pentameter, that's important. You know, there's a rhythm with Shakespeare, and to do that, and at the same time to make that sound conversational with that, you know, kind of, you know, old English, you know, I mean, because he was speaking in poetry, you know, to do that and to make that, to bring that down to a level where it actually feels like something people can relate to, that's where the hard part comes in, I think. You know,
well, I could tell you, I could barely read it when I had to in high school, let alone consider, you know, getting up on stage and having to, you know, I mean, we always have enough trouble, right, in TV making words work when they don't work, and I just, that's not something I was willing to bite off. But your first on screen role was then in the film Five on the Black Hand Side. How did you get involved in that?
Well, you know, that's interesting because that's what brought me to Los Angeles. I had come back to the Bay Area. There had been kind of a family situation. My mom was going to have cataract surgery, and I remember thinking it was much worse than it was actually, you know. And so I came back for that, and I was broke, and I couldn't get back to New York because I left in the middle of a show. And so a production came from Los Angeles. There was a comedy called Norman, Is That You? And the only role that they hadn't cast, that they didn't bring from their cast in LA, because they were doing a non-union show in Los Angeles. They brought it up to the Bay Area, and they at the On-Broadway Theater in San Francisco, and it was a union show. And so I got the role of Norman, and you know, it's a gay guy, right, who's, you know, whatever. And so then one of the people, one of the gags in it is that they bring a prostitute to try to convert Norman. The father does. He discovers the father breaks up with the wife. He comes in to stay with his son, finds out his son is gay, and one of the things he does is he brings a hooker. Well, the hooker and I started seeing each other, you know, off you know, off camera, off stage. And then she left the show. And so she went back to LA, and I would go down to see her, you know, you know, you're dark on Mondays, you know, we would play Tuesday through Sunday. And after that Sunday night second show, because we had 2 shows on Sunday night, after that second show, I'd fly down to LA to see her, hang out with her all day Monday, and then come back Tuesday for the show Tuesday night. Well, I'm down there, and she gets a call to go in for an audition for a film. And so she tells her agent, you know, can you reschedule me because my boyfriend's in town? So an agent, being an agent, says, well, how old is he? How tall is he? What's he look like, et cetera? Why don't you put him in? So I went in and I got a role in that movie. But that's how that happened. And that's what brought me to LA, was to work on that film.
Well, you had a few roles, and then you got to the lead in one of the leads in the series, Kareem, and which also starred Stacy Keach. How different was it now to be like a series regular, as instead of having to be like guest stars on things?
It was great, man. I mean, because one, we shot that all on location. We were down in the Caribbean. You know, we shot in St. Thomas, we shot in Puerto Rico. We were primarily shooting in Miami. And other parts of Florida, you know, shot in the Keys, you know, Key West, you know, and of course the Keys that are right around Miami too, Key Biscayne, whatever. But it was such a cool show because, you know, we spent some of that time. We had 3 shows that we shot, you know, in out of the country. So that was great, man. That was live.
God, wow. So
yeah,
then,
man.
And then a few years later, that brings us together. You and I meet when we co-star together in the have to qualify it sci-fi series Fantastic Journey. Do you remember what led you to that show?
I just went. By that time, I was you know, in LA, and you know, I had an agent, and so I think that was more conventional.
Yeah,
where I just went in for an audition and got the role. I'm trying to remember, who was that gentleman who was the writer on the show, who was on the set? What was our guy?
Man. I don't remember the writer who was on the
I was
set.
gonna look him up because he was kind of cool, actually. I remember him. He was a nice guy. I remember meeting him in the audition. You know, and I don't know who made the decision to, to cast me, but originally, remember, we didn't have the same cast. Remember, the pilot was a different cast.
Oh yeah, no, I was going to jump into that here in just a second, because it was very, very bizarre. I mean, the pilot was one kind of concept, where it was like, okay, different time zones and different periods of history all kind of brought together on the island. But then when it goes to series, the whole show changed direction, and they decided to go much more sci-fi. And of course, a whole bunch of our cast members were let go, including Scott Thomas, who played my father.
Right.
And I remember like being very jarred by that. And I had a kind of a little bit of a tough time, because I remember I had the scene where I had to, like, you talk about making words work, say lines that had to make some sense of why my father, as the character, would go ahead back to our original time zone and leave me behind with the rest of you guys. Right. And then we all move forward without him. It was completely bizarre. But what else do you remember about that? Do you remember it like striking you as particularly odd?
I don't remember what they did with your dad. I just remember that he wasn't with us when we came, because there was another woman who was really beautiful. Remember Karen Somerville?
Yes.
She was in the first. Is she the same Karen Somerville that had a relationship with Peter O'Toole? Did they get together, or is that?
I have no idea. I don't know, but yeah, you're right. She was
a knockout.
She was stunning and really a really good actress. So we also had Susan Howard,
yes,
who went on to do Dallas, or was doing Dallas or something like that, and then she's gone too, and it was just you, Jared, and I. I mean, that was it moving forward. So I always say this: I was just quite relieved to still have a job.
Yeah. Well, me too. Let me tell you, a funny story about that, dude. Funny story about that. I used to go to psychics at that time. Because, I had, my son was born. And so, when you're a father and you're an actor, and, you're working, and then, then you're on unemployment, and, all of that game, right? It's a little precarious. And so, you find yourself prone to, trying to find out what's the future going to be, right? So I used to go to psychics. And I remember I went to see a psychic. This was the first part of December of 76. And we had done the pilot already. And so she said, the psychic I went to see said that she said that I was going to get this phone call for a job. And she says, you're just really going crazy. You're really just very, very happy. And she says, it's going to come Friday. It had happened that morning on a Wednesday. And someone in the publicity department had called me and said, don't tell anybody, because we're going to announce this on Friday. Serious. And so she said, but it's for work next year. But we were going to have a start date originally a couple of days after Christmas, which was, the same year. So I was nitpicking, right? Damned if once they called, they came on that Friday and, said, that I was picked up and all of that. And then on a week later, they pushed the date to go into the next year, which was in January. It was just a few weeks. But it was like, she was like, I was amazed.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I was amazed. Yeah.
Was the person you're talking about Bruce Lansbury? Is that who?
Well, Bruce.
No, he was the producer.
Yeah, okay. He was a producer. Bruce was not on the set much. That was Angela's brother, who was, I think Leonard somebody. Was it?
Katzman?
There was Leonard Katzman. I don't know if he wrote, but he was the other producer.
Yeah, he was on the set with us. I remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, just curious, were you familiar with Ike and the Witch Mountain roles before this series?
Yeah, I was. I had seen Escape to Witch Mountain. I'd seen that. Yeah. Yeah. I was actually thinking, I was in awe, man. I'm thinking it's a little star, because I'd seen you on in a film. And at that time trying to, movies and television were, they're two different animals.
Oh, very much so.
Television was like you were the stepchild of the
yeah,
of the situation.
absolutely.
And then you had done a movie, man. I was like, hey.
I felt super fortunate that I was able to straddle that line because there were so many people. The 70s were television people, and then there were film people, and those two just really didn't cross over. So I felt really lucky. And then comes along an even bigger movie star that joins the cast, Roddy McDowall, which was a very big deal for me. I was a huge fan of his and really respected him. And he and I actually became quite close, and I really enjoyed working with him a lot. What was he like to work with for you? Because it's a very big difference between the grown-ups and the teenager on set.
It was a professional relationship. We never got close or anything. I was closer to Jared. Yeah, I was, so I didn't really hang out with Roddy. I just saw him on the set, and he was cool. He was cool with me. I mean, he was a professional. And, I was kind of, because, I was pretty green, I had done Carib and I had done guest star stuff, but I still, see, I didn't come from you had, been as a kid, you had been working in film and had been around the whole theater scene or whatever, I had done some plays, but they were always assignments in high school. And then when I was in college, the only reason I was doing, theater was because, the girls were pretty, man. And in the drama classes. So I was over there trying to, because there were athletes there, and that's where I found out about it, was from the football players. They said, man, you got to take drama class, dude, And so, that was, so I never really felt, that I was part of that world. Even though I was studying and I had done plays and all of that, I still didn't really feel that comfortable, as an actor. I was getting more comfortable as an actor. And again, it was hard because I wasn't, the series, what was good about the series is that it gave you an opportunity to, to kind of work regularly and get more used to, the camera and all of that. But when you're the sidekick, you know how it is, you're coming in, you're giving a lot of exposition, you're talking about something, because I started playing these cops, and I was playing a doctor in that, I believe.
Yes,
I think I was a doctor in that. Well, I always played doctors and cops, and so I would come in with this complicated dialogue about, some kind of medical condition or something or whatever. I don't remember, but it would never be anything that was usually, where I was in conversation with anybody, which are harder, easier lines than when you're given a lot of exposition.
Yeah. But one of the things I did like, I did like that they did was they, each episode they kind of gave us each our own show, one that featured our character more out front than the others, and moved that around a bit. So I thought that was kind of nice. And of course I was terribly disappointed when the show was canceled. It really never had a chance because NBC kept bouncing it around the schedule. It really didn't get a chance to secure an audience, and so it was no big wonder to me that it had gotten canceled. So
I remember that now. That did happen. We kept getting bumped.
Yeah,
we kept.
It was like the last 2 or 3 episodes, and they canceled us before we finished our 12. It was at 10 episodes, and then the last 2 or 3 aired like weeks after the other episodes. It was very bizarre. It was very, very, very bizarre and unfortunate. But hey,
it's interesting. I guess they really weren't that sold on the show. Is what
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't remember if we started a fresh season or we were a mid-season replacement. That was something else. I just don't think we ever.
I read, you were a mid-season replacement.
Yeah.
Is that what it? Maybe we were.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you know, that automatically, man, you know, you were just a space filler, you know, you
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, I, of course, had a great time doing the show, and I loved working with you, all you guys. It was a really great experience for me. So I just have to tell you, I have nothing but fond memories of that.
Me
And it was
too.
so, yeah, it was so great getting to know all of you guys. So,
Well, I'm going to ask you something that I'm confident you've not been asked in other interviews. But that you mentioned athletes a second ago, and speaking of which, one of my favorite series growing up, it was religious viewing in my house. You competed on Battle of the Network Stars, so
Yeah.
and I said I never missed an episode. How much fun was that for you to do?
Oh, that was great, man.
You
That
did
was
well on
live.
that too, by the way. I watched your episode this weekend. You did very well.
We won, you know, we
Yeah.
won the money, man. It was like 20 grand, which was a lot of dough at that time, you know. And it was
yeah.
and I remember in fact, that's where I remember your father. I can't remember what he said, because he quoted me something. I some ridiculous remark when they put the mic in my face. I remember, and I said it was a matter of what is it? I can't remember, will, perseverance, and money. Or something. I don't know what the first two. I remember saying money at the end. And
Yeah.
he came up and said that to me, you know, laughing about the fact that I had said that when, you know, when they on the day that we had the competition. So yeah.
Well, we've had other guests on our show who competed on that show too, and they said that everyone, you know, just came there to have fun, but once the competition started, it was taken much more seriously. Did you find that to be the case?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, man. And in fact, you know, I remember, you know, people were cheating. I mean, there was,
oh, wow.
You know, there was, yeah, man, you know, once you get there, you know, and the money's on the line, I mean, hey. But we had a great team, man. It was, I remember Dan Haggerty was on our team. Kurt Russell, who was a, you know, professional athlete, he was on our team.
Yeah.
Linda Day George was on our team. Jane Seymour was on our team. What's it? I can see him now. He was on Bye Bye Black Sheep. Well, what's his
Robert
name?
Conrad. He was the
Robert Conrad, but I was thinking of W.K. Stratton.
Oh, yes.
W.K. Stratton. And Robert Conrad, of course, was on our team, but he was a captain. But W.K. Stratton was someone I knew from back in New York, you know, when we were doing a play together, and you know, and you know, he was also one of the kids who was, you know, in the Shakespeare Festival. You know, he'd gone to Juilliard, I think, or the American Academy, one of them. But WK was on the team, and he was fast, and he was fast. He was fast, and trying to think of who else we had on that team. Pat Hindle, I think was his name. He was in the remember they did a Invasion of the Body Snatchers in the 70s. He was in that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was in that with Donald Sutherland. And,
yeah, sure, absolutely.
Was
I
Conrad
remember
as intense as he appeared on screen? So,
what's that now?
Was Conrad as intense as he appeared on screen?
Oh, you know Robert, yeah, man. I mean, you know, Robert was cool though. I liked Robert. You know, Robert was is he still around?
He passed.
He passed. Yeah. Robert was a wild guy, man. You know, because Robert had been a stunt guy. I remember I had worked with him before. Well, maybe it wasn't. I'm trying to think of, I guess maybe I worked with him after this.
On Centennial, you worked with him.
Yes, so that would have been after this, because I think we did the Network Stars in '77, and I worked with him on Centennial. And it was funny because we were working in Estes Park, Colorado, and he had those commercials where he would put a battery on his shoulder and he'd say, "Knock it off, I dare you." Well, all these guys, man, these you know, the film company in town, and we're in the bar of the hotel. All these guys are coming in with their batteries.
Oh my God.
Wanting to fight him, you know, wanting to fight Robert.
Oh geez. Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
You also had a recurring role in another great series, the A-Team. This was during the time when Mr. T was just exploded in popularity. I mean, what are some of your memories of appearing on that?
Oh, I just remember I could hear T before I could see him, man. You know, you could hear, because he was always on, you know. It was, you know, the A-Team, they would bring us in. It was an interesting thing because, you know, you were a glorified prop. You know, what would happen is that I played the role of Captain Crane. There was Colonel Decker and Captain Crane. Lance Legault was Colonel Decker. And they would write us in when the scripts weren't up to, you know, whatever. When the scripts, they didn't feel that they were, you know, charged up enough or whatever, I don't know. And so then they would add us in. And it was kind of, you would, a lot of times they call us in, you know, it would be, you know, along a couple of days but ahead of time, you know, before you come in, you know. So it wasn't as though I felt like I was really part of the show, because, you know, you didn't know whether you were going to be in it or not. And you get there and, you know, you're kind of like not part of the, you know what I mean. But it was interesting. It was interesting. I remember at the time I was doing a play in town, which I really wanted to do, In the Belly of the Beast with Andy Robinson and Andy Wood. And we did it we started at the first place was at the Taper 2. Then we did it at the Taper main stage. And then we went to Australia with it. And then they took it to New York, but the A-Team would not let me go. Wow. They said they were gonna fire me if I went to do that play in New York, which really hurt, because I needed the money, so I didn't, you know, go with them to New York.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they love to do that.
yeah, you know, and I was interchangeable. I wasn't, you know. Yeah.
Well, what made you decide to transition into directing?
I lost a lot of money I got together with a guy. We wrote a script together. He was going to direct it. I was going to act in it, do the lead. Because what had happened is I got inspired by Sylvester Stallone and what he had done with Rocky. And see, Rocky, he was part of, I was a pocket client of at the time there was this law firm, Pollock, Bloom and Deckham. And I was a pocket client of a guy named Jeff Sidney. And so I knew all about that whole thing that was happening over there with Stallone, because they were handling him. And it just felt like such a fairy tale. It was great. So I wanted to write a script for myself. And first I wrote this suspense terror thing, which I did get optioned a few times, but, you know, they wouldn't let me act in it because they wouldn't mean it was, you know, they'd give me a small role, but they were saying if it, you know, because it would be a black film, basically, you know, if it's a black lead, and they had this whole thing about that. But at any rate, we did this other thing, and I ended up really losing a lot of money and never making the movie. And because I was, you know, kind of relying on someone else to direct it. And so I decided I still had the bug. And I thought, you know, I'll try to get in the AFI. And so fortunately I was, you know, chosen to, you know, you apply, and then a lot of people apply, and then some of them they choose you. And so I went in, and that's where I made the transition, was at the American Film Institute, which was like a major, I mean, I have nothing but great things to say about that place, because it really, really did change my life.
Well, earlier in your directing career, you made several films for, you know, the legendary Roger Corman, who's known as like the king of cult cinema. How did you become involved with him?
Well, I was at the AFI actually, and you know, you do those the first year. You do these little workshop pieces, and you get how many days? 4 days to shoot it? 5? Or was it even 4 or 5 days to shoot it, or maybe less? I don't remember what it was, but. And you're not supposed to show them, but everybody does, you know. And so
yeah,
they got to a woman. I was divorced at the time, and there was a lady I was seeing who was an attorney, and she showed them to these people. Diane Gutterud was her name, who had been part of the Godmothers, I think, up here in San Francisco, but she was in LA with another company. I can't remember what that name of that company was, but she sent them over to Corman. And Anna Roth, who at the time was working as a producer for Roger Corman, she's the one who hired me to do this film in the Philippines. I had to meet Roger, of course, and he approved me. but she hired me to direct this movie, write and direct this film in the Philippines. And of course, once I got there, I realized, that why it was nobody else probably wanted that job, because there was like a bit of an active revolution going on over there.
Oh, no.
The New People's Army, the NPA, was pretty active in at the time, even though this was after Marcos had gone. Aquino was in as president, but there was a lot of rebel activity out in the provinces, and Todd Field I hired him and brought him over and risked his life, who just directed Tar. He was my lead actor in that. In fact, I risked his life a couple of times, actually, because I took him with me to Peru,
Well, I also read that you credit your career to the film One False Move, co-written by Billy Bob Thornton, starred Bill Paxton. How did you become involved with that? And can you tell us a little bit about the backstory, because it was supposed to go straight to video originally?
Yeah, I was divorced at that time, and there's a lady the woman who's my wife now, Jessie Beaton. She had been in sales and acquisitions at Island Alive, and so she'd gone to a party, and they respected the movies that she had bought, Kiss of the Spider Woman, Baghdad Cafe, Mona Lisa, River's Edge, Trip to Bountiful, She's Gotta Have It, Dark Eyes, all those films. And so they said, look, if you can get us a script, Larry Estes was his name, who was a company called Columbia TriStar Video, I think is what it was. RCA Columbia is what it had been, and then it changed to Columbia TriStar Video. They financed it. Larry Estes was their I don't know, executive who, and so she needed a director, and the three things: script, director, and an actor, that they would approve. So they liked the script that was called Hurricane at the time, which was became One False Move. Someone suggested that she contact Anna Roth, because Anna had canvassed a lot of directors, and I think Roman Coppola and some other people I think she saw, and so she saw my short that I did at the AFI and hired me. And then we went through the process of trying to get an actor that the studio would approve, and there were several got turned down by a lot of different people, Tim Robbins, Jeff Daniels, et cetera. And finally, we came to who we actually had wanted from the very beginning, that he had been a big enough name, and that was Bill Paxton. Because Bill is, he just felt like Hurricane. Bill was the guy who was, what you saw was what you got from Bill. He was just upfront, honest, guileless, and just a really just, good guy. So we shot the movie, and unfortunately it was going to go straight to video, which was not something they had originally told us, but we probably should have known that, because, it was a video company. And so the ancillary rights were gone, when someone wants to come in and distribute a movie, they would like to have other means of revenue, in case it doesn't do well at the box office. They want to be able to, at the time there were cassettes, they wanted to have other streams of possibilities for income for the movie. So the woman who is my wife now, who was the producer at the time, she got it to Ann Thompson, who wrote for the LA Weekly and who liked it a lot. She got it to John Hartle in Seattle at the Seattle Film Festival. He liked it a lot. And she got it to Sheila Benson. We just had a big memorial here yesterday for her at our house, for Sheila Benson, who was a personal friend. And Sheila got it to Roger Ebert. And Roger, and he became he and Gene Siskel loved the movie, and they stumped for that film. They were on, the morning shows, and, besides their own show, they were going on other shows and talking about it. And so that's how, and because what happened, and so my wife said, she wasn't my wife at the time, but she said, look, if you guys want to, sell more units, there are 3 strong reviews. We've got a really strong review in Seattle from the major review, critic there, John Hartle. We have another one in LA from Ann Thompson, and we have another in Chicago from Roger Ebert. You can release it, give it a token release, and then you can put those, because they're only going to review it if it goes to theater. And then you can put a quote on your, little boxes that you're selling, and it'll sell more units. So okay. So they gave it a token release and it caught fire. People word of mouth. And so we played all 51 markets. It was an amazing summer, man.
Oh, I heard about it from everybody in town, and I absolutely freaked out and loved it when it came out, and didn't even know you directed it until I saw your name up there. I mean, it was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. And it's, for everyone who's watching this, it might not be a film on your radar, but good grief, it's an incredible thriller. Really just compelling story, so well done. And I know you did it on a shoestring budget. You had to, but not only did it get a good review, but Gene Siskel named it the best movie of 1992. I mean, my God, what was that like for you to have, all that attention before it even gets to the theater?
Oh man, it was, the attention came once it got to the theater. Because we were, it was a little movie that could, it was like, it was just, it was just an amazing summer because you kept getting it, because it didn't have a conventional release. It wasn't released all at once in say all 51 markets. Mm-hmm. You kept having this surge over and over again because it'd be an undermarket. I remember I was doing a thing. I'd just gotten a gig. I did HBO's first miniseries, a little thing called Laurel Avenue, which took place over the weekend. It was an African-American family in St. Paul, Minnesota. And it's just the events over the weekend. And we were casting that. And I remember, between casting sessions, knock on the door, and my wife was saying, she was not my wife then, as I said, and she said, yeah. We have lines down the block in New York, which was like, wow.
Wow.
But yeah, it was incredible. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Devil in a Blue Dress, because the film had such an amazing cast: Denzel Washington, Don Cheadle, Jennifer Beals, Tom Sizemore. I just wondered, had you been a fan of the Walter Mosley books ahead of time before this?
Well, what happened was we when we were going to do One False Move, we spent a lot of time waiting to try to getting turned down by actors. And this is how my wife and I got together and became a couple, because we'd sit in this office, nothing to do, waiting to hear from, waiting to hear if one of these actors take forever to read a script, especially when you're nobody, And she saw this book, and at the time she was losing her house, and she saw this book, and she read the thing about Easy losing his house, and then read the thing and said, "Oh, this is great." And so I read it because of that, and it was like, wow, I do like this. And I always like noir. It's always crazy about noir. And so she got together with what happened was once One False Move came out, then TriStar was interested in signing me to a deal. Sony signed me to a deal. And what happened is everything coalesced. I wanted to do Mosley's Devil in a Blue Dress. Denzel was interested in the books. Jonathan Demme was kind of, was interested in them as well. And so he had contacted me and said, "What do you want to do?" He was going to be kind of an umbrella for me. And he was like, and so I said, Devil in a Blue Dress. And so it all kind of coalesced. And it was funny because we were in Minnesota shooting that miniseries, and Jesse saw that Walter's, my wife's name is Jessie. Jessie saw that Walter was appearing at a book signing in Minneapolis, which is just across the river. And so we booked it over there, and she had her books for him to sign, and I'm there. And so then I said, why was Mouse not in your draft of the script? He says, you read my script? How did you read my script? But I had read his script, and they were putting him through the ringer, man. I mean, you know, they really, development, whatever over there really, you know, had him. They wanted a much more take charge kind of a lead, so they fused the character of Mouse and Easy together, and so there was, you know, you know, and he was ready to throw up his hands because, you know, he's a novelist, you know, and
yeah.
And
well, yeah, clearly. I mean, two incredibly different disciplines, as we all know. But you then go on to write the screenplay you shot. Is that a daunting task to try to then, you know, take over essentially for him and respect a property that already has its fans while still needing to translate it for film?
It didn't feel like a daunting task because it felt like when I was reading it, I could see it. I could see the movie, and it just felt like it was something that just needed to be seen as a film. I mean, there are certain books that you read where they actually structurally just feel like a movie, and this had that feeling. This wanted to get made as a film. You know, I'm a firm believer that, you know, a piece of art, you know, it kind of at some point it starts telling you what it wants to do. You know. I mean, I think it's Michelangelo used to say that, like, inside of the stone is already the sculpture. Yeah. You know, you just got to knock away all the excess or whatever.
One of my favorite artistic quotes. Yeah, I've just got to get rid of the excess stuff, and it's right there inside. I've loved that. I've loved that. Yeah.
Did Mosley get approval of the final script?
He wasn't, he was cool with it. You know, he wasn't involved in that part of it. You know, I think he had really just been, you know, they put him through a lot, you know, and, and, you know, it's like so much of it had nothing to do with story. You know, when you start talking about, you know, let's fuse the lead and all of that, make it more tech charge and all that, you know, there's a whole set of dynamics between the two characters. You know, the one guy's been to war, doesn't want to kill anymore. You know, it is like wants to leave that, and the other guy can't kill enough. You know, he's a loose cannon. So it's like you can't really fuse those. I mean, you could, I guess, but it's a whole different. Then it becomes about that as opposed to the whole, you know, plot.
So Denzel was already attached when you became involved. Was he already, like, they already cast him?
He was attached. And that was fine with me because who else, you know? You know, it's interesting. I mean, because Wesley Snipes, I know, was interested. He had a deal over at Fox, and they were interested in the books. You know, it was one of those looked like it would be a promising franchise.
It's not something that you say, oh no, I have to take Denzel, right?
Well, you know, it wasn't. Yeah, I didn't say it wasn't like I have to take Denzel. Yeah, it was so. Yeah, okay, all right. I'll take
it. if you insist, fine.
That's it.
Well, by then you'd already directed several films, but now is there a different sort of pressure that comes with, you know, making a film starring Denzel Washington? You know, he was already a big star at the time, so.
Because I did another movie with him, you know. I did
prior to that.
No, after that.
After that, yeah. But I mean, going into this one, was there more pressure because you've got a huge star like him, you know, to work with?
You know what? During the writing, when we were writing it, we became friends, and so I got to know him, you know, and so I didn't really feel because, you know, there was, having been an actor, there was a language that I could speak with him. And he's a smart man, and he was reading a lot of the stuff that I was reading, and, you know, we were just, you know, I enjoyed the friendship, and so we, you know, communicated on a level that, you know, I think intellectually that you know, that was familiar, that created a familiarity and a common kind of a, you know, means of communication. He was cool, and so, you know, it was I didn't feel intimidated by that. You know, you know, it was cool.
So other than Denzel, did you cast the other characters yourself?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, we had Vicki Thomas was my casting director, but she brought me some great people, and some good choices. And of course, Don I had known before, but Don Cheadle, but I hadn't seen him as Mouse, because he and Denzel were supposed to be contemporaries, and of course there's difference in ages with them. And Denzel had just come back from his vacation where he had been, he always would do that in the summer, where he would on a yacht, he and his family, I think, and Norm Nixon's family, they'd get together and they would sail the Caribbean, the Mediterranean, and so he came back, he'd had a lot of that good Italian food, and he had a big beard and whatever. And so I didn't know if Don could look old enough, because they're supposed to be the same age. And Denzel kept saying, look, man, I'm going to be young. I'm telling you, when it's time, I'm going to be young. And he did, of course. This fucking guy looked like he was like 25 when he came in, excuse me, I'm sorry to use profanity. But at any rate.
That's all right.
What's his name? And Don was just so good. And so we just thought, all right, I'm a bite the bullet, because Denzel kept saying, man, that's the guy. Right. And he was the guy. It's just that when I had worked with him, it had been in the 80s, 88, and this was 94, or 93 or whatever, because we shot it in 94. And he still was just a kid to me, because he was only 21, 22 years old then. And so and I'd seen him on screen as Rocket in Colors, and he was, again, just like a kid. And so I couldn't get that out of my mind, but they came together, and they basically, it was great.
Well, I watched it again this past weekend, and Don Cheadle was just incredible in it. I mean, did you think while filming it, like, this guy's going to go on to like great things after this? Did you think that?
Yeah, I mean, I had a feeling, because the thing is, we had such a good time. I ruined some of the best takes in that, man, by laughing and shit while we were actually filming. We had such a good time shooting that. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, he was just amazing, and there's just nothing scarier than a guy that's trigger happy that can't stop joking around. It's just that's just so unnerving. So is it true that his performance made you reinterpret the way you'd originally written the character of Mouse?
No, actually, I was already writing him that way, because it's suggested that he's that way in the book. But we were, but the humor wasn't as much humor in the book.
Yeah.
And so with Don, when he came along, there was the opportunity for more humor. I'd already put some in, because it felt like it just was, some of that just was just waiting to come out. Yeah. But then when we started rehearsing, oh yeah, man, it was great then. It just really blossomed.
What about Jennifer Beals? Because she was also great in this film, and she'd also been in some other amazing movies. I had read that you had loved her, but you were afraid to cast her. You didn't want to. You were debating casting her.
I was debating casting her because the big reveal in it is that she's mixed race.
Right.
And Jennifer had come out publicly with that after Flashdance, and I was worried that would tip off everything. That people would know, not realizing that a lot of people did not still know that Jennifer was mixed race. So that was what that was about. It had nothing to do with her ability. In fact, it was her ability, because she was so good that I just had to say, I got to go with the actor. She was fantastic, but it was mainly just because she had publicly, she had said that her father was Black, her mother was white. And so I was, I didn't know. I just thought, okay, that's going to kill it for us in terms of everybody's going to know, what the deal is, So that was my reservation there. Yeah.
Well, you already mentioned you're a big fan of noir films. What is it about the genre that appeals to you so much?
I don't know. It's a visceral thing. I mean, I guess I could break it down into one of my favorite actors I will watch anytime I see him on anything is Humphrey Bogart. You know, I just love, and so I associate him with noir, of course, and I like Robert Mitchum a lot too, and I associate him with noir. And so there was, when I was a kid, there was an interesting thing happening when I was a little kid, because that was in the 50s when I was a little kid, and there was this whole kind of Italian neo-realistic influence that had happened in, you know, European films, and they were starting to come to the United States, and they would come on late at night, and that drew me. You know, these movies, these Italian films with Anna Magnani and Silvano Mangano, and Sophia Loren, and in Italian, and Gina Lollobrigida. I'm naming women, all, of course, but there was also, there was just something about those movies that were more real, and this drew me. And I didn't even a lot of times know what the story was about, but I was just drawn to the imagery. And it was the same thing with noir in a lot of ways, and just that world that they would create, the bad women and the interesting kind of complex, corrupt guys and stuff. I mean, it just for some reason was interesting to me, and maybe because I grew up around some of that, I don't know. But it was it just how you're just drawn. You don't necessarily know. It's like falling in love with someone. Why do you fall in love with him? You can try to categorize it and list the items or whatever, but is that really it, or is it something that you can never explain?
It was supposed to be a series of movies, right, originally, and then they stopped that. Is what happened there?
Well, that genre typically does not do that well at the box office. Even Chinatown didn't do that well at the box office. And you look at something like, it's because it's such a cult classic now, and it may have done better after it won awards. It was the same thing with LA Confidential. LA Confidential, once it won awards, suddenly they re-released it.
Yeah.
And people went to see it and whatever, but it's not a genre that is that popular anymore with the American audience. It was in the 50s, and I guess I don't even know about the 60s really, but that genre doesn't really translate for the most part into big box office.
That's so interesting, because I'm like you. I have this absolute visceral attraction to that, to noir, especially. For me, in science fiction, when it's applied there, I think is pretty amazingly powerful. But there has been over time talk about revisiting the property, either as a film or a TV series. Do you have any idea if that's still being discussed, and would you be willing to be involved if they do?
Yeah, I don't know. I hear at different times that they're talking about it, but it never goes beyond, just the rumor. From I don't know. I've heard even recently that they were talking about revitalizing, doing a TV version of.
I had read that as well, a TV version recently.
But I'd not, and a few years back, I remember I'd heard the same thing. So I don't know.
Well, looking back at it now, you just mentioned now it's become so well regarded, like after the fact now. How satisfying is that now? At least you're getting the respect now for that film now, at least.
Oh, it's great, man. I tell you, I was doing I shot the last 4 episodes of a series called Mindhunter that that David Fincher had. We were shooting in Pittsburgh, and Eddie Muller, who does Noir Alley on TCM, he was hosting a noir festival at the Music Box Theater in Chicago, and they were opening it with Devil in a Blue Dress and One False Move. And so I flew out for that, and just seeing the trailer with Devil in a Blue Dress and my movie One False Move being included in with like Out of the Past, The Big Sleep, just they showed this trailer and they had my movies cut in there. Oh man, that was like wow. So yeah, it feels really satisfying.
Well, you mentioned Mindhunter. Now you also did 13 Reasons Why and Dahmer. Now, with Dahmer, this is based on a real person. And so is it tough to get into that headspace that, to tackle the subject?
Yeah, it is. It's not like, being an actor and getting into that space, because Evan really had, to go deep, so I don't envy that. But, that world was so, the fact that I only did the pilot was forgiving, because originally I actually turned it down a couple of times because, and then it was like, okay, it was so well written. It was a good deal and all of that. And I decided to do it. But I don't know that I could have, been in that world for a year.
Sure.
For me, it was, a few months, couple months, post pre-production and then shooting and then post. But man, if I had to live in that world, that would be a whole different matter, because
yeah. I've told you this personally, but that opening, that first episode is just the most chilling, stressful, tense, uncomfortable filmmaking I have ever seen, with, thank goodness, a payoff in a sense, because I was digging my fingers into my thighs and saying, I don't know if I can make it through this, but it was just so incredibly well done, deftly handled, by everyone involved. And if you can say I really liked it, given all of that, I really liked it. So thank you for that amazing work.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you have an upcoming project for Apple TV called Manhunt, which sounds absolutely incredible. Can you tell us about that, what we can expect, and how you got involved in that project?
Well, that's actually based on the book Manhunt. I don't remember James, God, I can't remember his name, the guy who wrote the book, but it's about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln and the hunt for John Wilkes Booth. And I don't know. I mean, I shot my version of it, and I've not had a lot to do with what has happened with it since. So it's not like I know a lot about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just curious on that one. While researching the project, was there anything that you didn't know, that discovered that you weren't necessarily familiar with about the Lincoln assassination?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't really me doing the research. I didn't realize that. I thought it was just John Wilkes Booth. I didn't realize that there was a whole network of people involved in that. I didn't know that, it was a bigger conspiracy than, and that also that that there was another attempt of an assassination of someone else in the cabinet that same night. I didn't know that. So there were, there are things in it that are definitely revelatory.
It's James Swanson, the book.
James Swanson, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you have had such an impressive and prolific career, with 40 titles as an actor and 35 as a director, and you're still going strong with Manhunt. What's next after that?
I have a project. In fact, I've got to finish I got a couple of things I got to do. I got to hand off the Bible I'm writing for in Netflix on the rise and fall of the Black Panther Party. So I'm working on that, and then I'm actually leaving in a few weeks to go and do a pilot and second episode of Aaron Hernandez, on something on the Aaron Hernandez thing called Gladiator. Yeah, so that's in the immediate future. That's coming up. Long term, I don't know. I mean, I got stuff I want to do. We'll see if it gets done. You know how it is, Ike. Hey.
Oh yeah. You got to have 6 things going to hopefully make one land, and then it's a crazy business, but yeah, you clearly got the addiction. I have the addiction, and there it is.
I thought we were going to talk about the fantastic journey. It's good, because I don't remember much of going on. I didn't have any really good stories, but I was actually waiting to hear some stories.
Well, you'll have to wait and read my memoir. I've got some stories.
Oh, okay. Are you writing a memoir on it?
I did. I have written one. Yeah, it's it's being shopped to publishers right now, and yeah, it's fundamentally about the insider experience of being a child growing up in this business and what it was like from very much from my perspective as a child, and then maturing into it and learning how to adapt all that to a whole grown-up world. So yeah, I've enjoyed writing it very much, and I can tell you, because I can cut this out later, but Jonathan is actually my literary agent, and he's sending it to publishers right now. So we will see what happens.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. Don't tell anybody anything I don't want them to know.
No, it's nothing like that. But I just, I have a pretty, I would, for some people say impressive, but a very clear memory of a lot of my memories for most of my young life. And it aided me greatly in being able to, recall the experiences, working on Skip Witch Mountain, and, going back to my very first commercial at 9 years old, and all of that. Wow. So I feel very blessed as far as that's concerned. And, as the challenge always is, okay, so you have all this, how do you turn it into a story? And I think I did a fairly good job. Jonathan likes it at any rate.
I've wondered I wondered specifically about you, because you were one of I think you were the really only child actor that I worked with as an actor. And I often wondered, because things get a little randy on the set, people say things that they wouldn't say. I mean, that most, the whole kind of entertainment world is a little bit wilder than the other office life or whatever, that people are accustomed to. And it just, as a kid, you're exposed to so much more. In a lot of ways.
My general experience was, especially working for Disney, but no, I mean, I had some of the finest set teachers I could hope to meet, who were, not only my instructors and giving me my private education on the set, but they were also essentially my guardian on the set. Had to look out for my welfare and my well-being, and making sure that I was working in an environment that was conducive for a child. And a couple of my teachers, man, if somebody let a four-letter word slip or something inappropriate, they would go right up to him and say, no, you don't do that. Ike's here. And so I was well protected and insulated. I saw my share of stuff, but generally speaking, most of the crews I worked with were extremely respectful of the fact that I was an impressionable young person, and wanted to make sure I wasn't overly exposed to too much too soon.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, we still have to do the end. So
Carl, we need to wrap it up here for
I do want to thank you so much for joining.
Oh, hey, man.
It was a real pleasure having you.
It was a pleasure. It was fun.
I'm Jonathan Rosen, along with Ike Eisenmann, and this has been Pop Culture Retro, and a very special thanks to Carl Franklin. And again, please subscribe.
Thank you for listening to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast.